What do you get when you take one of the most iconic monster stories of all time and put it in the hands of one of the most celebrated directors of this generation? You get Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein, a passion project for the maestro of monsters that adapts the famous literary tale penned by Mary Shelley. The pairing seems like a match made in horror heaven. However, Frankenstein has been adapted so many times over the years. Does Del Toro impart enough of himself into this movie to make it stand out? Will this deliver on fan expectations and be considered the definitive take on these characters?
Some of what I will tell you is fact. Some is not. But it is all true. Victor!
Guillermo Del Toro and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is a pairing that just makes sense, right? Del Toro has made a career of crafting films that favor a more forgiving take on monsters and uses them to tell very human stories. He has talked for years and years about wanting to make his own adaptation of this literary classic, but nothing ever came to fruition until about 2023 when the project was revived by Netflix, with whom Del Toro had signed a multi-picture deal. When it would be announced that this would be his follow-up to the universally praised Pinocchio, fans were intrigued to say the least, hoping for Del Toro to give us the definitive modern take on this story. What we end up with is something that is shockingly close to the source material that leans away from what the story has evolved into and focuses more on the core elements of what this story always was. Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein is the story of God and creation, monster and maker, father and son. The film follows Victor Frankenstein, a brilliant yet tormented scientist whose quest to defy death leads him to create a being unlike any other. What began as an act of ambition soon spirals into a battle between creator and creation, a reflection of guilt, loneliness, and the search for humanity in both man and monster. The film is story told in two parts: Victor's tale and the monsters. Victor explores his past, his relationship with his parents, and where his obsession with life and death stems from. Tragedy drives him in his quest to conquer death and master everlasting life, a quest that finds him a brilliant but arrogant professor who dares to spit in the face of modern academia, which in turn casts him out for his radical and repulsive ideas. However, he catches the eye of a wealthy benefactor, and with his help and funding, Victor is able to create something both beautiful and horrific. He finds himself unprepared or simply unwilling to nurture the fruits of his endeavor, which leads us to the second part of the film, The Monster's Tale, the story of a victim of abuse, created by the victim of abuse, burdened with a life that he never asked for, deprived of the peaceful rest of death. This version of Frankenstein is almost slavishly adapting the Mary Shelley novel. It even has the same framing device as the book featuring Captain Anderson. This was surprising to see, as I imagined Del Toro doing something that was more removed. However, it was a good surprise as it shows how much reverence he has for that source material and overall better service the story that he was trying to tell here. I actually think it was quite refreshing to have a highly anticipated adaptation of Frankenstein lean more heavily into the novel, as Frankenstein in the cinema landscape has been shaped mainly by the iconic Boris Karloff film. That's really what people think of when they hear Frankenstein. And to his credit, Del Toro veers away from that in his depiction while also paying respects to it, presenting us with a monster that is designed to look more closely like the original description of the creature. I think the changes that Del Toro does make from the source are welcome, as it's clear that he's approaching this story from his own perspective, one more heavily influenced by religion. This film, like many versions of the story, deals with playing God and creating life. However, this version of Frankenstein feels more Miltonian, focusing heavily on Catholicism and the moral implications of our actions. Paradise Lost was a part of Shelley's original story, and you feel that influence carried over here. Milton's influence is also felt in this story as it explores the fall of man in its own monstrous ways. Victor is very much someone who is reminiscent of Lucifer in that story as he attempts to defy God and rule over the natural laws of life and death. The monster is more of a Christ-like figure in his depiction here, as there is a lot of Christ-like imagery in the birthing sequence of the creature. The monster is born in a crucifixion pose as opposed to just laying flat on a table, and it's this religious imagery that forces the audience to ponder on the meaning of it all. In the Bible, God sent his only son to live, suffer, and die for our sins, whereas Victor forsakes the creature to live through the sin of his own hubris. Del Toro has called this film autobiographical in a lot of ways. He was raised Catholic and imparts a lot of himself, his relationship with his father, and his experience as a father into this movie. This is why he may have felt more restrained and handled this with more of a delicate hand than other creature features in his filmography. His Victor is part scientist, part artist, and he found the perfect actor to bring this version of the character to life. Oscar Isaac gives a performance that is unrelenting. His Victor is brilliant, arrogant, and mostly unpleasant. However, Isaac's natural charisma and likability makes you want to invest your time with him. A man with the power to change the world who can't see past his own trauma. I love the choices he makes playing Frankenstein. It feels fresh and exciting while hitting all of the important notes that Victor needs to hit in this story. I love that his Victor is a little bit rock and roll in his design, peacocking a bit with his choice of attire. Isaac is the perfect choice to bring this garishness to life while still making you give a damn. The success of this film rests solely on the casting of Victor Frankenstein and his creature, and with a successful Frankenstein, a lot of the pressure landed on the shoulders of Jacob Elordi, who replaced Andrew Garfield in the role of the monster. I was very, very curious to see what Elordi would bring to this role and whether he had what it takes to bring to life a Del Toro monster. Elordi's performance is not only good, but I would say it dominates the movie. The second he appears on screen and brings the creature to life, he demands your attention, providing us with a performance that is both physically and emotionally stimulating. As an actor, he's on another level, utilizing every inch of his body to breathe life into this creation. He moves with a bumbling fluidity that seems equally clumsy and graceful as he learns to live in this body that essentially he was given. What's truly beautiful is the evolution of Elordi's performance, as he quite literally must take this character from birth and grow him into a functioning and developed being. Del Toro's script favors the monster, which is to be expected, but in doing so, he gives Elordi the chance to shine as the creature shows how beautiful the hardship of life really is. The design of the creature leans more towards the tragic than the horrific, as he's still scarred and pieced together, but you're able to see more of the monster's humanity, which is 100% intentional. Beyond the two leads, this film is filled with strong performances, though one of my only faults is that some of the characters feel a little underutilized or underserviced. Specifically, Christoph Waltz Heinrich Harlander and Mia Goth's Elizabeth Harlander. Goth actually plays two roles, but this is the one that has the most focus, and while I think she is good, I think the script doesn't really do a great job of servicing the character properly. She has a decent-sized role in the first half that feels unfinished and kind of just disappears for a large chunk of time. I understand why she's used the way she is in the first half, but I would have preferred another scene or two later on. I say this because the first half is Victor's story, and the movie does not shy away from the fact that Victor is the true monster. It's almost kind of heavy-handed because it's the building block to the overall themes of father and son, cycles of abuse, and forgiveness. With that in mind, Victor is unable to see anyone else's perspective during his story, as in his mind, his story is the only one that's important. He's a victim, and the world is constantly taking from him. He only really can see someone else's POV when the monster shares his story, and Victor realizes all the mistakes and what he's actually done, leading him to seek forgiveness from the son that he hurt the most. This duality in storytelling leads to two amazing performances from Charles Dance and David Bradley, two men who serve to shape man and monster into what they become. While the roles are smaller, they stand out more because they feel instrumental to the overall story, and each actor is fantastic. This movie is graced with a marvelous cast that really helps to bring the Gothic fantasy to life. And for that Gothic aesthetic, I really must applaud Tamara Deverall for production design and Shane Vio for set decoration, as they have put together a modern Gothic masterpiece in their design. This film is a treasure trove of amazing Gothic visuals. I mean, just the castle set alone is full of character, and it was through them that Del Toro was able to bring his vision and scale to life. I also have to take a beat to discuss Kate Hawley and costume design, as her costumes are full of minute details that really help to breathe life into these characters. I love Victor's overall look, and the Easter eggs she puts into a lot of these costumes shout out the original Frankenstein film, and it's truly amazing. This movie just feels like a huge collaboration in perfect harmony to serve the vision of one of Hollywood's most visually unique directors. The scale is impressive, the world feels big, but it never overshadows the intimacy of the story. While I did enjoy this movie, I honestly don't think I can say this is Del Toro's best in my mind. I think a lot of people went into this expecting it to be his magnum opus monster movie, but instead are given a much more intimate look into the soul of an artist. I personally like that about this movie, as it really does separate it from other Frankenstein films, and when you have the character like Frankenstein that is constantly being adapted in new ways, it's okay to do something more straightforward and faithful to the source, especially when the person doing it has such flair as Del Toro. Honestly, the biggest failure of this movie is that it needs to be seen on a big screen to fully appreciate all the effort that was put into making it. And unfortunately, it has a very limited theatrical release window before being streamed on Netflix. I was lucky enough to see it in 35mm, and I was blown away by the color and the visuals. It truly was a fantastic theatrical experience. That being said, on a scale of 1 to 5 Del Toros, I give Frankenstein a 4.5 out of 5 Guillermo Del Toros. This is a fantastic film, one of my favorites of the year, and I highly recommend you check this out in theaters if possible, and if not, make sure you watch it on Netflix when it's released.